friends are simps.
In today's video, I want to talk a wee bit about photography, and more specifically, I want to talk about some of the reasons why I have come to hate it. Now, photography for a very long time has been quite a big part of my life, but the main focus of this channel has really been on music. So synthesizer demos, gear reviews, and all that kind of thing. And the reason for that really has been that over the past few years in particular, the production and performance of music has been my particular creative outlet. I've invested a lot of time, a shitload of money, and also a whole bunch of emotional and artistic energy into that. But it wasn't always like that. And in fact, for many, many years, photography was my go-to. You know, I did make music all that time, but I never really felt like I was any good at making music, whereas I felt that I was pretty good at taking photographs. And as a result, you know, I was the guy that if we were going to the pub or, you know, there's a wedding or some kind of family event, I would always have a camera with me, I'd be taking pictures, and people kind of came to rely on me as that was my social role, if you will. And in many ways, I think that I came to intertwine my sense of identity or self with that particular form of expression, in the sense that it allowed me to more easily interact with and kind of relate to the world around me. Now, I parlayed that kind of interest and obsession at times into, you know, work. So I paid my way through university by doing photography jobs for nightclubs and events and newspapers and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, it was a key part of my life. Now, as I think it's probably natural for anybody that's got a creative outlet like that, or a particular form of expression that they're especially drawn towards, I had ups and downs. So I had times where, you know, I was more or less interested in taking photos or all of the stuff that's around photography, like, I don't know, developing film and all that kind of thing. But over the past wee while, at least maybe the 5 years or so, I've increasingly felt like I am not just disinterested in taking photos, but also as if I'm distant from that whole part of myself. And I've actually come to actively resent and probably even hate photography, hence this video. Now, I think that whole relationship with creative pursuits and forms of self-expression is actually really interesting, and so I wanted to do a video talking about some of the reasons why my relationship has changed with photography, or at least the reasons I think it has, because I'm sure there's other people out there that have had similar experiences and might be able to share them with me. I think it's important to say at the outset that I'm not doing this video just as a clickbait thing, you know, why I hate photography or 10 reasons photography is shit or anything like that. I genuinely really love or loved taking pictures. It was a key part of who I was and who I am and how I saw myself, and I actually kind of mourn the loss of it. You know, I didn't just dabble in, you know, taking pictures for a while and now I'm like, well, I'll move on to the next thing. It was important to me, and I'm not sure if I would ever be able to get that back or even what that would look like. So that's kind of, this is a genuine video talking about something that I'm passionate about. Now, the first reason that I hate photography is a wee bit difficult to explain, in the sense that it relates specifically to the word photography itself, or at least the way that people use that term. Now, I've never liked the word photography because it feels to me when I hear it, or at least the way people talk about it, as if they're setting up this idea of photography as a separate thing, you know, distinct from them, that they have to get into. You know, people always talk about, oh, I'm into photography, or I'd love to get into photography, and that kind of language feels really alien to me, and it never matched up. You know, this idea of photography as some kind of amorphous blob where you have to find your way in and there's defined exit and entry points, that just didn't make sense to me, or at least it didn't match up with the way that I felt about taking pictures, which was much more, you know, just simply a compulsive creative thing. You know, it was my form of self-expression. It wasn't something I had to get into. It just kind of, it felt natural. And that may seem, you know, a wee bit wishy-washy or kind of pseudo-intellectual to some people, but I do think it's important because, well, I'll come on to explain why it's a bit important. The fact that people like taking or creating pictures for whatever reason doesn't necessarily mean that they have to enjoy the process or the gear or any other elements of photography that people have decided are part of this collection. And I think that the term for that reason is both inadequate and also really reductive. Now, following on from that, the second reason that I think I really have come to hate photography is because I've had a long growing hatred of other photographers. And I know that might sound as if I'm saying I'm the only person who can talk about photography or what photography is and all that kind of crap, but that's not actually the case. And in fact, it's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to say. What I really mean is that as soon as you have this idea of photography as a thing, then that allows people to come in and tell you what is and isn't included in photography, or whether or not you're actually a good photographer, or whether you're a photographer at all. And so, for example, the idea that you can't be a real photographer unless you've studied it at university, or that you can't really be into photography unless you've shot with a film camera, or you're not really all that into photography unless you have a brand new camera, or you've tried lino printing, or whatever the fuck it might be. That kind of attitude of exclusivity is something that really does my fucking head in, and I despise. Now, I can't tell you the number of times that I've been working in a nightclub or at an event, and it doesn't matter whether I've been there for years or whether I've been working for a big newspaper or whatever, I've had people come up to me, and to be fair, it is usually guys. There have been girls, but it's usually guys, and they come up to me and they want to scrutinise my camera, and it's not out of genuine interest or because they want to chat to me. The vast majority of the time is because they want to look at the camera I've got and tell me all about why and how they've got a better camera. And I even had one guy tell me that I was holding the camera wrong, even though I'd been working in this nightclub for something like 10 years and was doing it, every night for, the gall of somebody to do that is unbelievable. But that was not uncommon, and I have to say that as much as this might surprise people that are interested in synthesizers and music and all that kind of stuff, this happens more often in the world of photography than it does with music. There is such a focus on gear fetishism or one-upmanship or proving who you are and what you can do that is a really unpleasant experience. Now, when I first started taking pictures professionally, it was a completely different situation. I was one of the youngest people that was working for newspapers at the time, one of the newest folk that were in the photo pit with all of these established press photographers, and they were all really friendly, really helpful. They would give me tips and tricks, they would help me out if I needed a lift somewhere, all that kind of thing, and it was a really welcoming kind of community. But that all changed as more and more people began to come in and were working for free in particular, but also just had this very cutthroat attitude where they wouldn't tell other people about jobs that were available, wouldn't tell people how much money they were making, and I just get sick of all of that crap. Anyway, kind of money and jobs aside, the third reason that I've come to really hate photography is because I find it deeply creatively unsatisfying or dissatisfying. I'm not entirely sure what the correct word is. By this, I mean that I never really satiated the urge that I would feel to take photographs. So with photography, when I was really into it, I would get obsessed and I would want to take more photos. I was looking up photo books, I was trying to arrange portrait sessions. I just wanted to be taking photographs and editing them all the time. That was something that kind of consumed me. And the problem with photography was that I never got to the point where I felt creatively fulfilled. Now with music, there's this kind of end point. There's a natural point where you've created something, it exists, and you can't really spend much more time on it, whether it's because your ears fatigue or whatever it is. Whatever the reason might be, with music I find it to be much more satisfying an experience and a process compared to photography, where I never actually got that. Now, I think part of the reason for this actually is because on reflection, photography is much more about documenting or capturing something rather than creating something. Now, I know this might be controversial, particularly with the crowd of people that like to call, taking photographs, making photographs, which I really don't like either. But what I mean by that is that with photography, or at least the vast majority of types of photography, you are capturing something that exists in front of you. There are creative choices being made in terms of the camera, the lens, depth of field and all that kind of stuff, but really you're not creating the scene out of nothing. You're observing it and you're documenting it. At least that's how I always, approached and found photography to be. Now, there are obvious exceptions like fashion shoots and, very high art things where you have complete control and you get a model in and you do, you have them dress up a certain way or whatever it might be. But that's a very particular form of photography and definitely not the most common. Often, I actually found myself really depressed because I wanted to have this kind of creative satisfaction, but I couldn't get it. So it just became like an obsession that I couldn't get my head out of. Whereas with music, I find that kind of release in a way that I never did when taking photos. This kind of ties into my next point as well, which is that photography often has a particular reliance on other people in a way that music, for me at least, doesn't necessarily have. Now obviously this won't be the case if you're into, I don't know, macro shots of flowers or landscapes or something like that, because in those scenarios you can easily go into your garden or go down the road to the park, or I don't know, jump in the car and drive up a mountain and do whatever landscape people do. But in my case, I was much more interested and infatuated with taking pictures of people, whether that's portraits or, you know, places that people inhabit. And it meant I was really relying on the presence of other people, interested in interactions happening, or just arranging time out of people's schedules to come and meet me so I could take their portrait. And I think at some point or another I've gone through literally everybody I know and asked if I could take their picture at some stage, which, you know, I'm sure was very annoying for them, and begun to be really not fun, because there was only certain times you could do that. People are busy, they would flake out on you, and it just was really, it became more of a chore than it was fulfilling. With music, I don't have to do any of that. I can literally sit in the house and get much more creative satisfaction, even if I'm on the bus with the Dirty Wave M8 or, you know, my phone sequencing something like that, without having to rely on other people, without getting ready and going out to meet them and then, you know, getting a text saying, oh sorry, I can't come. So that's another reason that I fucking hate photography. Now again, leading on from the previous point, which at this point seems as if it's like some endless chain of hatred, the next reason that I've come to really hate photography is the intrusive nature of it. So yes, you have to rely on other people in order to get your creative, you know, satisfaction, but you also have to be quite intrusive. It's not really a normal thing to do, or I guess it is, but it feels increasingly like a weird thing to do, to want to take somebody's picture. And I mean, it doesn't help that there's all these creepy photographer stereotypes. I mean, there are many creepy photographers, but you know, that all kind of comes together in a way that makes me feel more and more uncomfortable. As I mentioned, for a long time I was the guy with a camera who would be documenting things in social situations, and to be honest, the older I've got, I've really come to hate that. More and more I feel the tension between wanting to take somebody's picture and also battling with the anxiety of, you know, asking their permission, or maybe dealing with the fact they're not all that comfortable with it, particularly on the street where there might be confrontation as a result. Going out without my camera and not having that pressure of having to battle anxiety when I want to just fulfill a creative urge has been really freeing and actually really rewarding. Again, this feeling of intrusiveness, or that just by engaging in the act of photography that you're doing something wrong or weird, is something that I don't experience with other creative expressions, particularly music, where if people don't want to hear your music, they won't listen to it and probably won't anyway, so it doesn't matter. So those are the 5 reasons that I have come to hate photography, and I don't want this to seem like there isn't actually anything good about it, or that I don't enjoy any part of the process, because I obviously do. There are still lots of things about taking photos that I really love and I wish I could find some connection to again. Firstly, I still really love experimenting with unusual lenses and cameras. So for example, I love shooting with my Canon 50mm f/0.95, and in particular getting pictures in low light in kind of clubs or bars when I'm abroad with beautiful neon, or something like the really bizarre Helios 40-2, which I think is an 80mm f2. It's this big beautiful black metal lens that just gives everything this crazy swirly bokeh in the background. Taking portraits with that camera in particular is amazing, although it's very impractical. I also really love shooting with my various film rangefinders, the Leica M2, the M6, but I've got a whole bunch of others that are a wee bit weirder and more idiosyncratic, and I like taking them out and about with me. The act of just shooting with them feels really nice, and I like doing that when I travel in particular. I get a lot of satisfaction from the pictures I've taken in Tokyo and, you know, around New York and stuff. And actually, I like having the end product of a collection of photos where you can look at them and go, oh, you know, this brings back a lot of memories and I feel certain things about a place. And that's really what, you know, a pure act of expression is. Now, if you're interested in buying some of the zines I've created, there'll be a link here somewhere. In particular, I really like the New York zine that I put together. It's pretty chunky, it's got really nice colour pictures in there. And so I like that about photography. I think ultimately what all of this boils down to is that I've been unable to find a sustainable way to feel creatively fulfilled with photography whilst also enjoying the process and the end results. And that is something that is getting harder and harder to do. I know there's a bunch of photographers that watch this channel and they have multiple different competing interests, and I would be really interested to hear from them, or you, I guess, since you're watching this, to tell me whether or not you have experienced a similar kind of shift in your interests and how you deal with competing or kind of simultaneous creative expressionisms and how they balance out over time, because clearly I'm not doing a very fucking good job. And who knows, maybe I'll just, you know, get back into photography in a big way and I'll have to rebrand this entire channel as All My Friends Are JPEGs. I don't know, but I fucking hope not. For now, thanks for watching. See ya later.